Welcome back to another explainer. Today, we're taking a deep dive into a truly fascinating paradox. When you picture the absolute most dangerous, formidable, or, just flat-out powerful people you've ever encountered, who comes to mind? Usually, it's the loud, dominant figures, right? The ones aggressively commanding the room. But what if the research tells a completely different story? What if the most dangerous people are actually the quietest? Today, we're unpacking the calculated power of silence. We're going to break down exactly why quietness is so incredibly misunderstood and how, for those who know how to use it, it's actually a brilliant, highly structured strategy.
And that brings us straight to the core of this whole concept. The source material presents a dramatic hook that completely flips our usual expectations upside down. It points out that the most dangerous people out there do not rely on volume. They're not shouting to prove a point, they aren't craving the spotlight, and they definitely aren't broadcasting their next move for the world to see. Instead, they stay silent. But listen, this isn't some passive, empty silence. No, it is an incredibly active state. Truly dangerous individuals don't need to shout because they rely entirely on the heavy, undeniable presence of their silence.
Okay, let's dive into this because we really need to shatter a massive illusion here. When society sees someone just sitting quietly in a room, what's our first instinct? We totally underestimate them. People immediately assume that silence equals fear or shyness or a deep lack of confidence. We literally view it as a weakness. But when you peel back that assumption, the reality is entirely different. Silence is actually a highly calibrated tool. Sometimes it's pure observation. Sometimes it's incredibly calculated patience. And in certain situations, it's a direct warning. It is a completely different internal mechanism than what the rest of the room assumes is going on.
To really wrap our heads around this, we have to look at the alternative, the dynamic between loud people and quiet people. The source draws a very sharp line here. Think about it. Loud people react. They're totally driven by the immediate moment. Things happen, and boom, the words just fly out. Biologically speaking, they're spending almost all of their cognitive energy just forming words, which leaves pretty much zero energy to actually process their environment. But silent people? They calculate. While everyone else is reacting blindly to whatever's right in front of them, silent individuals are actively choosing not to waste their words. They're holding back, conserving their energy, and intensely processing the room. Now, what's really interesting about this is the actual anatomy of a silent mind. We tend to think of a quiet mind as empty, right? But it's actually hyperactive. Imagine it like a giant pie chart. They're dedicating maybe 10% of their energy to words and a massive 90% to pure observation. They aren't just sitting there zoned out. They are absorbing everything. While the loud folks are totally obsessed with what they themselves are saying, the quiet person is playing a completely different game. They are gathering data.
And what exactly is that data? Well, while someone is busy dominating a meeting or a dinner conversation, the quiet person is systematically gathering intelligence. They're mapping out your behavior and your daily habits. They're noticing those tiny micro-expressions that reveal your deepest insecurities. They're even picking up on the exact things you are desperately trying to hide from everyone else. I mean, think about how powerful that is. When someone talks constantly, they're showing their entire hand. But the silent person? They are reading everyone else's cards without revealing a single one of their own. This right here proves exactly why underestimating a quiet person is a huge, critical mistake.
Now this brings us to a super important secondary piece of the puzzle, emotional control. Think of it like the eye of a hurricane. When the pressure mounts and things get really stressful, loud individuals get totally swept up in the storm. They lose their temper, they panic, their raw emotions completely dictate their actions. But the silent person, they stay right in the center, grounded, calm, intensely thoughtful. They simply do not let the chaos of the room enter their own internal environment.
We can define this state as emotional clarity. You know, when you aren't flooded with the adrenaline of an angry outburst, your judgment stays incredibly crisp. The source material is explicitly clear on this. Raw emotions cloud your judgment, but silence creates clarity. And that is exactly why, in a really difficult or high-stakes situation, the calmest person in the room organically holds the most power. They are literally the only one operating with a clear, unclouded mind, totally untouched by the reactive emotions that are driving everyone else crazy.
Let's move along and see how this builds, because this emotional clarity is exactly what makes them so incredibly formidable when they're pushed way too far. They don't just fly off the handle or react the second they're provoked. Nope. First, they wait. Second, they actively observe. They use all that data we talked about earlier, scanning for the absolute perfect moment and the best possible angle. So when they finally do act, the response is devastatingly unexpected. Because they never broadcasted their anger, their reaction catches absolutely everyone completely off guard.
So all of this leads us to a really fascinating psychological question, one that the source material hits head on. Why does silence feel intimidating? Think about it. If silence is literally just the absence of noise, why on earth does it make the rest of us feel so deeply uneasy in social situations? What is it about that quiet person in the corner that just naturally puts us on edge?
Well, it all boils down to the psychological void. Evolutionarily speaking, humans are hardwired to fear what we cannot predict. It's a basic survival mechanism. Loud people? They broadcast their intentions. They're super easy to figure out. You know exactly where they stand, which makes them feel safe because they're a known quantity. But the silent mind? It's like a locked vault. You never really know what's going on inside. It remains this deeply uncomfortable mystery. And it is exactly that uncertainty, that total inability to predict their next move, that makes everyone else in the room start to sweat.
And this brilliantly illustrates the ultimate takeaway when we look at historical and interpersonal dominance. Real power rarely needs to announce itself. I mean, think about history's most brilliant strategists for a second. The Stoic generals, the master tacticians, they all shared one defining trait. They were famous for speaking less and observing more. They didn't have to shout to prove they were in charge. The silence itself was the proof of their power.
But hey, we really need to make a vital distinction here. Silence isn't inherently malicious. Not at all. It simply redefines what power actually looks like. True strength isn't about hurting people or aggressively dominating them. No, true strength is self-control. It's self-mastery. It is the incredible ability to sit in a totally chaotic room, feel that burning urge to speak or react, and actively choose to stay centered.
So, the crucial point is this. If you want to spot the absolute most powerful person in any room, you just need to look for 3 specific things. They stay calm, they speak less, and because they're doing those first 2 things, they understand vastly more than anyone else around them. This is exactly why we can never, ever mistake quietness for weakness. The quiet person hasn't checked out of the conversation. They are just processing the whole thing on a much, much deeper level than the folks who are busy talking over each other.
And that realization brings our entire explainer full circle. It perfectly reinforces the central paradox we started with. Sometimes, silence is the loudest power of all. It's such a profound concept, isn't it? While noise screams for this immediate, fleeting attention, silence commands deep, long-term respect. Now, obviously, not every quiet person is a dangerous mastermind. But, as the text reminds us, every truly dangerous person knows the incredible, calculated value of silence.
Which leaves us with this final, lingering thought. As you step away from this explainer today and head back out into your daily life, your workplace, your friend groups, take a second to really look at the dynamics around you. The next time you meet a quiet person sitting perfectly calm while everyone else is reacting, ask yourself, what are they observing? What exactly are they calculating? And maybe most importantly, what are you revealing to them while you're busy making noise? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep observing, and I'll catch you in the next one.